Welcome back to the In the Lead Show. My name is Jennifer Sang, and this is episode number 26. On today's episode, I get to have a conversation with Catherine Mattiske, who is the author of Unlock Your Genius, Power Your Path to Extraordinary Success. And we take a deep dive into what it means to unlock your inner genius. I personally went through the assessment and discovered that I am a narrator with a power up of an independent, which reading through all the materials and going through all of the vault and information that's provided in Catherine's program seems to be pretty spot on. So I get to talk to her today about this unlocking your inner genius and what it means to. Catherine says it's not the speed of change that affects us, it's the direction and sheer amount of change that we are faced with every single day. Yet in all of this change, one thing is constant, and that's you. And the way you collect, process, learn, and communicate information is exclusive to you. It's your unique inner genius, the filter through which you connect with the world. And I think it's really, really important as leaders in any capacity that we are either leading our families, leading organizations, or just finding better ways to lead ourselves, understanding what your inner genius is and understanding even the different archetypes of the inner genius helps you understand and be able to connect and communicate better with those around you. And I loved understanding more about my own inner genius. I mean, I probably could have figured out that narrator. I'm doing a podcast and I love to talk about things that I'm passionate about, was my archetype. That totally makes sense, but it's understanding also all of the other archetypes and understanding how, if somebody might be different than you, how can you communicate to them in a way that helps them feel whole, resourceful, capable, and empowered. I had a lot of fun talking to Catherine about this topic and getting her perspectives and just her wealth of wisdom and knowledge from all of her years of experience. Now, to get into that, Catherine Mattiske is a leading global business educator and author with 30 years of experience across industries including banking, insurance, pharmaceutical, biotechnology, and retail. She is the founder of TPC, the Performance Company, an international training and consulting organization that has worked with Fortune 100 companies around the world. Established in 1994, TPC has offices in Sydney, Los Angeles, New York, London, Singapore, and Switzerland. Mattiske recently launched Inner Genius, a suite of innovative online tools that provides individuals with a personalized blueprint for optimal communication, collaboration, and learning. Mattiske is the author of more than 30 books, including the best-selling Train for Results, which is included on academic reading lists worldwide. In 2014, she collaborated with a team of professionals certified under her own ID9 Intelligent Design program to write training activities that work. She is also the author of the 27-part Learning Short Takes series of books. Her latest book is Unlock Inner Genius, Power Your Path to Extraordinary Success. Mattiske was a member of the U.S. Congressional Business Advisory Council. She has been awarded for her influence on U.S. business and has been nominated on several occasions for the Australian Business of the Woman of the Year Award. You can learn more about her at innergeniusnow.com and learn more about this amazing program that will give you tools and insights into, again, not only your own archetype, but archetypes of others. And I believe strongly that for leaders, it's important, the more that we understand ourselves, we can start understanding people. And the more that we connect with ourselves, the more we can start connecting with others. And we talk a lot about this on our program about how leadership is an inside-out approach. I come across a lot of leaders every day who want to worry and find ways to lead their teams better, want to be a better leader to others. Well, that starts with yourself first. And I think this is one of many tools that you can have in your tool belt to, again, help you understand who you are, how you think, how you communicate, and then how you can connect and communicate with others. If you want to get in contact with Catherine, I will have information in the show notes. And also through her website, Inner Genius Now, you can take the quiz and the self-assessment and discover your own archetypes so that you can start having a better understanding of yourself and then start having better understanding of those around you. I look forward to having this show go live. I've been sitting on it for a couple of weeks, and Catherine was a great guest where we discussed a lot of interesting things. So I hope you enjoy the show, and welcome back to the show. Welcome back to the Inner Lead Show. My name is Jennifer Sang, and I'm here today with Catherine Mattiske to talk about Unlock Your Inner Genius. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this because I had done the Unlock Your Inner Genius quiz ahead of time to kind of get to know what my kind of archetype is. And I'm really excited to talk about how it can apply to leaders and how they can use that to have a better understanding of themselves and even maybe understanding their teams better as well. But before we get started, I would love to know a little bit about you. So who is Catherine?
So I'm from Australia. I live in Melbourne in Australia, and I grew up in Adelaide in Australia, which is down the bottom in the middle. And I grew up in the computer industry. That's where I started my work. And I quickly transitioned into a training role in computer industry when the beginnings of the PC were coming out and everyone was doing Microsoft Word and Microsoft PowerPoint and Microsoft Excel training. Well, I was that trainer. And so that seems like 100 years ago now, but really the questions that I started to ask myself then are the same questions I'm asking myself now. Is I saw people back at that time, really, some people just embraced technology. They embraced the new, they wanted to be successful, and others were just sent to the training and it was like horrible for them. Or they said, oh, this will pass. And if I keep my head down and retire in 15 years, I'll be fine. Well, that obviously didn't happen. So it's those people that triggered my mind way back then to say, what is it with those people that make them, for me as a trainer, a joy to train? They were just like sponges. How do I get more of that? And so I was on that side of the story of training for a while, for the first 10 years of my career. And then I opened up my own business because I just wanted to do more and more and more. But that grounding in that computer training, just 5 days a week, sort of earned me my stripes when it came to learning and development and really trying to get people to succeed, sometimes willingly, but many, many times not willingly.
I'm smiling because I've spent much of my career in L&D, and that is something that I can relate to completely, because it's like, on the one hand, we know we need it, we know we want it, but on the other hand, do we have to? It's always that, like, most of the time it's like, okay, my boss sent me here, I have to do this, but it's not, like that really eager. You get maybe a couple students who are really eager, and the rest are just, I'm here, I'm bored.
Exactly. And so what I wanted to do was to construct a framework where we were producing many more of what I call high performance learners who are really motivated, really supported. Because in my role, in a training role, I didn't want to be teaching those people that were just there like prisoners, right? There's no joy in it for me. So that was really the beginnings of how do I construct programs. And by that stage, I was out of the computer industry. How do I construct programs, and how do I teach other trainers to construct training programs so that we can manufacture those people, that they show up, they want to be there, we can support them through. And that's been really my life's work, is really doing that.
Wow, that's amazing. Because there's so much value to the person individually, the organization, the industry, everything collectively, but how do we get people to that place? I think is really important. And I assume that's where kind of this program, Unlock Your Inner Genius, came from, was constructing this program to be able to help get people there. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah. So Unlocking a Genius really came out of the fact that I have been deep into very big organizations in the US and in Europe. And I do very little work in Australia. And most of my work has been with those big Fortune 100 companies in the US and across Europe. And somebody said to me, you need to be able to repackage, which is the business of ID9 Intelligent Design, repackage that and take that to a much broader market, take that to the everyone market. And I went, oh, that's a really interesting idea, but how on earth do I do that? So I sort of thought that through for a while and then came up with the idea of what's the real problem out there. And the real problem, when you really boil it down to the absolute minute problem, is that people, none of us have ever been taught how we actually learn the best and how we prefer to learn. We're just kind of dumped into school as a 4 or 5 year old, and we're tossed out the other end, either of high school or college or whatever we got to. And we just kind of go into this system, and we're never taught, certainly my generation was never taught how my brain works and how do I work in a different way to everybody else. And so when we come down to that, you go, well, hang on, why don't people know that? Because if you know that, then you just learn it your way, no matter how that information is coming to you. You go, oh, I can do this. You know, I'm going to convert this into my way and actually take on that information quicker. So that piece of it is universal. That is not a Fortune 100 or Fortune 500 company problem. That is not a team issue. That's not a leadership issue. That's an everybody issue. Yeah. So then I said, well, how do I do that? How do I actually get people to do that? And so I created this profile with this really complex algorithm behind it to say, which is really where my computer experience came in, because I could think that way, to create a profile to say, let's measure how you like to prefer to learn, and then how you process that information. And then with that, there comes the stark realization, wow, this is me. But then if I'm a leader, for example, I go, holy moly, everyone's different to me. Yeah. I've got team members who are now different. I've got my senior leadership team who are different to me. How do I then connect with people that are different to me, with different learning preferences, with different styles? And then how do I then take that forward and communicate in a whole new way to those people to maximize my influence? Yeah. That whole story is really the inner genius story, which I've called that the genius quotient, GQ. So we've got IQ, and then EQ, and now GQ. So there's nothing wrong with IQ, classic measure of intelligence from the early 1900s. Nothing wrong with EQ. 1990 came out, revolutionized the world. Now we need something different for this era that we're in, and especially in this whole pandemic story that we're all living through. What is it that makes those people who are really successful, really successful? Yeah. And this is one of those elements, I think. Wow.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, I think for me, there's always been something missing. It feels like EQ, IQ is only a piece of the whole person, right? And I think a lot of these things like GQ can help you identify some of maybe those other pieces, or maybe the correlating piece, maybe that connects these different things that help you then be able to understand yourself and then in others, and be able to then, again, set up environments that are really benefiting them and bringing out their genius or their best potential. As you were talking, it was reminding me of a story I had of when I was in college. I used to always take a tape recorder, and I'm not young, but I'm not old, but we didn't have iPhones yet at that point, but I would take a tape recorder to lectures and I would record them and I would listen back to them, because I discovered that I can't write things down, or I can't read them and have it kind of stick in my brain. I do best when I hear something and I can pause and reflect and kind of do that deep processing versus just skimming and reading and kind of, so I realized that about myself at an early age, but for so many years, I thought there was something wrong with me because I couldn't take all of the data that was coming to me in these different forms in traditional school and really, have a way to be able to fit into the mold that they wanted. But for me, I had found a way that worked for me, but I know there are a lot of people out there who struggle with these things. The way the systems and things are set up don't necessarily work for me, but we can figure out other ways.
Exactly. And that's the key to it. And you managed to find your way with your tape recorder. And then I know, Jennifer, you did your InnerGenius profile. So what was your result from that? What was your archetype?
Yeah, my type was the narrator with an independent power up.
Power up. Okay. So let's just reflect on that. So the narrator, so when you do your InnerGenius profile, you come up with one of 12 archetypes and you're the narrator, and they've all got lovely symbols and Spotify playlist and Alexa.
I noticed that. I'm going to have to check out the Spotify playlist.
Everything's attached to it to really get you into your zone. And then you've got this additional thing called a power up. And for you, that was independent. So guess what? When you were just explaining what you did through college, your narrator is your learning preference is to say that you like to hear things. So you're an auditory learner, you like to hear things. So your tape recorder was perfect because you could actually listen back to that. So that's your preference. And you said you wanted to listen back to it and really lock into what was being said. Well, the other side of the narrator to get to that profile is your processing is what I've referred to as connect. And so for you, it's important that you lock into the big reason why you're doing something. What is the real point of this? What's in it for me? How can I take this for me or people around me? That big why, the Simon Sinek why. I bet you're all over that, right?
Yeah.
And so people with the connect processing power and the auditory, that's your world. Now you discovered that. And so that's one of your 12 archetypes. And so the challenge then is to say, well, you've kind of sorted that out in your own mind through life. You sorted out that tape recorder was a great tool for you. And as you said, there's a whole lot of people that haven't sorted that out for them. And so with your profile, in the report, there's a whole lot of triggers to say, use these words, use these methods of learning, use all of this to help you get in that expert zone. And for you, your real expert zone is your independent, like where you like to do things alone. And you just described that. So once you're armed with this, you know how you show up to the world and you can then take on information your way, no matter how it's coming to you. You just convert it into your way. The biggest challenge is then, how do you then, not necessarily just you, but how does a person relate then to the other 11 archetypes? So you're one, I'm on the opposite side to you. My archetype is a futurist. So how do I communicate to you in your narrator language? How do I explain something to you in a way that connects with you, where you go, oh, I've got it, I'm hooked in. And it's not in my natural language to do that. My natural language is futurist. It's very visual, it's very future thinking, ideas, big ideas, visions, plans, concepts, of all of that. Connect. Yeah, that's not my gig. But how do I then flex my communication to then be talking to you? Or a whole lot of you on my team, they're different. That's where the skill is. Yeah.
Well, and I can see how they come together because I work really well with a futurist. If you can tell me the vision, right? Because I am such a hyper connector, is I can probably see how that's going to work. Like I can actually make the roadmap or the blueprint, right? And say, yes, I can see how we can get there. I think.
Yeah. And I need you. I need you on my team. As a narrator, I need you because I'm not going to do all that stuff. I'm just off on the next vision. I'm on the next idea. I'm on step 17 and my team is going, hang on, we're on step 2. I need people with your archetype on my team. Otherwise, nothing would get done, right?
Yeah, right. Or I mean, or if we're all the same, right? Yeah, I mean, things don't get done, or if we don't.
Disaster.
Yeah, you want that diversity. One thing I was thinking about too is not only can I see this being beneficial for a leader, understanding their team, right? Like you said, what are the strengths or what are your archetypes, but also for yourself. I know for me, like just knowing myself really well before even doing this, just being able to have conversations with people and say, look, this is how I learn best. Even with bosses, right? Saying, look, give me time to process, give me the information. I'll come back to you with a really great answer, really well thought out, very, very much in line with what you're looking for, but I need that time. I need that space. You can't just throw things on me. So it's also about, I think, understanding yourself to be able to then craft, the environment that you need to be successful as well.
And we all have those expert zones. And if we can get into our expert zone, and for you, that's working alone, but for other people, it might be working collaboratively. It might be saying, okay, I'm going to work with my group on this and we'll brainstorm these ideas, or we'll put these plans into place, or we'll do all the detailed work. And it's really about finding that sweet spot. And for a leader, that's essential. That if you've got your entire team working in their expert zone, that team is unstoppable. That team just blitzes goals because they say, well, of course we can meet this because we're all working in our expert way. And what it's doing is it's stopping things like those emails that go backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. And then people say, oh, we should meet about that. And then there's a 2-hour meeting. And then there's another 2-hour meeting. That's all just rubbish, right? Well, let's get rid of that. And let's get everybody working in their lane to say, I know what I'm really good at and I know where I struggle. And I don't want to go into struggle street. Just get me in my lane and I can do whatever I want. Like, the worst thing that you can do to me, even though I used to teach, like 100 years ago, I used to teach really advanced functionality of Excel, like pivot tables and macros and all these complicated formulas and stuff. That was me. But that's not really who I am. And so the worst thing you can do to me is say, oh, here's a big spreadsheet. Can you just work on that for the day? Like, it just does my head in. But now what I've come to realize is you can give me that big Excel worksheet and that really detailed work if I can get myself in my lane. And a few weeks ago, I was really struggling and I was working on one of these big detailed projects, and my customer service manager and I were chatting, and I said, oh, Nick, this is driving me insane. He said, what are you doing? I said, I'm just going to plow through this. He said, so, because we're all working from home, of course. And I said, and he said, well, I'm not seeing anything going on in your environment. What's happening? And he said, what's on your Spotify playlist? And I went, oh, just, relaxing cafe music. He said, what happened to your futurist playlist? Put that on. He said, and let me see your spreadsheet. And I said, here it is. He said, where's all your color coding? And I went, oh my goodness, talk about me losing my own mind, because I was trying to go into another archetype that's not me. And so what I did was I said, okay, I've got to present this spreadsheet to a client. It was a full report thing. And I said, okay, what I'll do is I'll color code it all my way. And then at the end, I'll take that all off and put it back to gray and blue, which is their company colors. And so that's what I did. I got it into my zone and then I converted it back when I presented it. And I powered through. I had my futurist playlist on. I got another coffee. I was cool because I got in my lane. And so we all do it. We all kind of slip into this zone of mush. And I was lucky because I happened to have a conversation with him. But if I hadn't have had that, it would have been a bit ugly.
Right. No, I was just thinking, wow, it's great to have support like that to kind of ground you and remind you to get back into your lane. That's awesome. And so one thing that was coming to my mind as you were talking was thinking about leadership. And let's say I'm an executive leading a large team. And what I've noticed is that a lot of times leaders want you to adapt to their style. So they'll say, oh, I'm an improviser. Oh, I'm, all the different traits there are out there. This is how you can work better with me. And I've always thought, like, shouldn't it be the other way around? Like, shouldn't you be the one who's kind of adapting yourself to all the different personality types, styles, everything on your team? It's not a one size fits all approach. So it sounds like you're saying this model that you've created is there's all these different archetypes, and it's about, as a leader, understanding all those different archetypes and almost having to change or kind of augment how you interact with those team members to bring out their genius, bring out their potential. It's not always about what's best for you. It's about helping kind of create that space for your team. How does that resonate with you?
I think that is the ultimate goal here. Okay, so that's the ultimate goal, but that's a skill, and that's a skill that's learnt over a period of time. And so it's what can be done right now. What's the easy steps to do that? And there's a few easy steps. The first one is to realize that it's okay to be a bit one-sided in what you're doing, because that's called your natural communication. You communicate out in your language, which is really, I'm not talking about, English or French or Spanish, but in your learning language, you use words that are indicative of how you process information. And so those are naturally occurring words that you use and you gravitate as a leader or anybody in their language. And it's okay to be cognizant of the fact that you're just doing it your way. So to actually ask people to adapt to your way is pretty clumsy, but it's at least better than not saying anything, right? So at least you kind of aware.
I guess so. Yeah, you're right there.
But step one is to really say, if I can spot somebody's archetype, which is a skill, or if I can have my entire team do the profile, I will then know my team map. So that's a good step one. But what if you don't know the person's archetype that you're talking to, or you're like a CEO that I was working with a few weeks back, where he is talking to 100,000 people.
Yeah.
So what he did was he said to me, Catherine, I think I'm really good at doing videos and town halls and things like that. And I said, you are. Like, he's brilliant. And he's the head of a pharmaceutical company. And without giving too much away, in your bathroom, you probably have their products. And so he's charged with the responsibility of setting the vision and the direction of an organization of 100,000 people. So there's no way that he could know everybody's individual archetype. So he said to me, I said to him, send me something that you've done. And it was a copy of a video recording. And what I did was I did some microsurgery on the transcript of that recording. And it turned out, I knew his profile because he'd done that. And it turned out that he was actually only hooking in people like him in his archetype and 2 other archetypes. Now there's 12 and he was hooking in 3. So in 100,000 people, he's really only connecting to 25,000 people. Now you might say, well, that's pretty good. But what about the other 75,000? They could be thinking, oh yeah, just another CEO address. Oh yeah, nothing in it for me. Oh, that was interesting. Yeah, isn't he good on camera? Or wow, he's really confident. But they're not hooking in and being influenced by what he's saying necessarily. So I said to him, let me rewrite this for you of what I would add into this to make those other hooks happen, to the other 9 archetypes. In a 6-minute video, I added 105 words to that transcript. 105 words.
Wow.
And those 105 words changed the trajectory of that communication. And I showed him how those words added into that communication moved that needle from 25% to 100%. And said, say that. And he went, this is the best thing I've ever heard in my career. he said, is that possible for me to do it? I said, yeah, until it's a learned skill, until it's actually an onboarded skill that you have, follow this template. The next time you do a presentation, follow this template. It's called the inner genius wheel, where you just plot your communication out in a structured way and you hook in all archetypes at once. And I said, next time you send an email, before you press send, don't press send, just stop and check, have I got the structure right? Have I hooked in who I'm talking to? Mm-hmm. I give you all the tools to do that. So off he went into a whole new world. And the trick is if you don't know your team member, what their archetype is, it's okay. Or if you're talking to many people, it might be customer groups, it might be your marketing team going out to the market. If you do that in a balanced way, people are listening to that, or they're reading it, or what they're watching it on a video or whatever they're watching, and they're going, wow, they're talking to me.
Yeah.
It feels like it's me.
Yeah.
It's not. It's just that those hooks are coming in so rapidly that you don't have to wait for very long before yours comes up. Yeah. So you feel like it's for you. Yeah. And really, it's that whole way of talking in a balanced way. And that's the real trick.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's what I was thinking was, yeah, it's not about necessarily trying to target one or two, but how can you, like you said, have the hooks in to everybody so that every single person listening will have that moment of, oh, he's talking about me or he's talking to me.
Yeah.
And having that connection, I think, is so important. And one thing you were also mentioning that kind of brought me back in my own journey is as I've done more work, and I've done work in other models as well. So as I know that more and I get to know myself more, I start seeing it in other people. So it's not even like you necessarily need to have everybody's archetype, in front of you. You can start spotting things, right? As you kind of get to know yourself and your own archetype more, you can then start researching the others. You can start saying, oh, so-and-so on my team, they must be a, futurist like you, right? Or, and you can start identifying that more. So I think even if you're a leader and even if you yourself just take the test and get to know kind of your own archetype, you can start to kind of see that in others. And like you said, build in those hooks to start touching everybody on your team and creating more of an inclusive environment, which is what I think most leaders are trying to do.
Well, exactly, because it's actually less problem, isn't it, for a leader? If you've got a well-functioning team without drama, how easy is that? It's actually nice to go to work. Who wants to go to work with a team that's not functioning or full of drama, or I won't work with her, I won't work with him. Nobody wants that. So that spotting that you talked about is actually the flip side of that, is really listening to the questions that people are asking you as a leader. So if you are talking about a particular project and you've got one person who's just making lists and going into the detail and whatever, that's an indication of what their preference is. And that indication is going to put them well into those detail archetypes. And so that's where they're going to be. Or if you've got people who are saying, well, that's all very well, but we need to change the process here, and we need to now reconstruct this way that we're working, or we need to re-engineer our processes or whatever, they're very much in that construct type of archetype. And then you've got people who we think of as being often quite difficult, and because they're the people that are saying, oh, but that'll never work, or we've tried that before, or what about this, or what about when that happens? Well, it's all very well having a 5 p.m. deadline for that report, but what about if this happens? What about if that? And that grinds the gears of a lot of leaders, because they've just given out this great idea, it's a project, they don't want all that stuff to what they think is interrupting, but those people are just learning their way. And when I first started training, like 100 years ago, when I first started training, trainers out the back of the training center would be talking about, oh, I've got this person who just can't stop asking questions. And I've got this person, what about this? And what about this? Oh, they're driving mental. They're difficult participants and whatever. They're not difficult anything. They're not difficult people. They're not difficult employees. They're not difficult participants on a training program. They're not difficult participants in a team meeting. They're just different to you. Mm-hmm. And so I, as a trainer, embraced that and went, that's a great idea. Let's learn to use help and look up that answer, because I had no clue. And it's like, okay, let's have a race. Who can find it in a scavenger hunt in help straight away? And everyone, a great activity. Answer, that person was satisfied then. So it's all about noticing and really being hypersensitive to what questions are people asking, how do they function, and then you can start as a leader to really say, wow, they're really in the detail. Let's give them more of that. They're really in the getting in and getting it done. Let's give them more of that. Get them into those sweet spots.
Yeah. Oh, and I was just smiling and trying not to laugh while you were talking, because I'm that person. I was about to raise my hand and be like, that's usually me, going, wait, how does that work? Wait, what are you talking about? No, I see. Because again, I'm a hyper connector. So I'm already like 5 steps ahead of you, connecting the dots.
Trying
and I'm
to
like,
connect everything. Yeah.
That doesn't work. What do you say about that? And yeah, there have been leaders in my past who have been like, oh, here goes Jen again, just kind of pooping on our party. But I'm like, but like you said, it's the way that I learn, and it's the, there is a skill, and I also had to hone that skill too, because you don't want to be, really abrasive or, but also learning, there are people out there who can actually, it may be kind of annoying in the moment, but we're helping you connect the dots to see what you might not see kind of 10 steps ahead, or the dangers or pitfalls that are coming.
Exactly. And without those people, the pitfalls come, the dangers come.
Yep.
And you don't want them to be quiet. You don't want to shut them down, because those pitfalls will come. And then that person inside is saying, I told you so, I told you so, I told you so. I could have told you that. Yeah, never worked. Yeah, never. Yep. And so you want all that to come out, and to reframe that from annoying to, okay, what's Jen got to say here? Let's tell us all of the potential traps that we could fall into here. Where are our connection points to other areas of the business week? What do we have to strengthen here? Over to you, Jen. That's a difference,
Yeah.
And giving those people the light and the space to be able to function in their expert zone, because they bring all that to the table. And I see so many people who just sit in meetings, and I've seen it during the pandemic on Zoom, like they could just have a face of them on Zoom, because they're just sitting there like for an hour. And I go, wow, that was an expensive person to have on a Zoom call saying nothing. And I often think, what's their expertise? What are they thinking? But they weren't brought into the conversation. They were just there sucking up a space on Zoom. It's like, they all bring their perspective to the party. And if they're brand new, they bring almost an external perspective. And if they've been there for 100 years, they bring all of that experience with them, and anything in between. And I think it's about the courage of the leader to say, how do I connect? And it's actually okay. And I want differences. And that is the courage of that leadership piece, to say, bring me your different perspectives, because I value that, rather than it's my way or the highway.
Amen. Oh my gosh. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that over the years. And it ends so tragically. And like you said, so much intellectual property, intelligence, everything is just lost, whether people are just glazed over in a meeting, quiet. I always tell my boss, I'm always like, I get worried when people are quiet. When people are just kind of going through the motions, that's an indicator to me, like, oh, what's going on? Either, we're not giving them the information the way that they need to learn, or we're not inviting them. That was one other thing that came up for me, was I often talk about how leaders need to invite people into conversations. And that includes even the video you were talking about, right? How do you extend that invitation to somebody? It's by creating that hook, by creating that a way for somebody to connect directly to what you're talking about. And I don't think, at least in my observation, working with a lot of leaders in a corporate setting, I don't see that enough. I see more of hey, we need to get this done. I'm going to dump a bunch of information at you, and any questions? Okay, no, let's go. And it's like, whoa, wait a second. Like, works well for some people, does not work well for me at all. But again, I think leadership is about, what was coming up too was some of that emotional intelligence, that awareness that you keep talking about. And the best leaders I've worked with have always had that really deep sense of awareness to be able to say, hey, Jen, I noticed you've been quiet. What's going on? What are your thoughts? What do you think about, what do you see as maybe a pitfall, knowing my archetype? Invite me into the conversation. Say, I know you love connecting the dots and you can see what's ahead. What are you thinking? What is coming up? But invite them in.
Exactly. It's certainly a way to start a conversation. And I was in a meeting, I was presenting to a group just before the holidays, and I got on the call, and it wasn't my meeting, and I was being invited in as a guest. So I got on the call and I was waiting to be introduced and so on. And there were about 60 people joined the call and no one was talking, nobody. And the CEO of the organization was there and he wasn't talking either. And he just said, I will wait for everybody to join. And it was absolute crickets. And I thought, whoa, what's this organization? And someone said about 2 or 3 minutes in, which is a lifetime on a Zoom call with nothing. He said, I just want to test that my speaker's working because I can't hear anything. And someone said, it's because nobody's talking. And I thought, wow. Yeah. And that idea, and then when I talked to the CEO afterwards, he said, we're such a connected group. Everyone loves working with each other. And I felt like saying, really? Really? That wasn't my observation. Firstly, as a CEO, he was late to the meeting. That was number one. Like, why? He should be there 5 minutes before, making the most of that precious minutes as people join. Hi, how you going? What's happening? I heard you did this. That's great. I saw this, blah, blah, blah. They're golden minutes. Showing up first, being the first on the Zoom call is number one priority. Great opportunity to connect and really, be human. But this sitting there, whoa. And they all did the profile. I then went back after a series of workshops. We did a 6-week program with them, and I did a series of workshops with them, and they showed up differently. And I thought, okay, if I've had something to do with this, fantastic, but something different had happened to that group of 60 people as a result.
Something shifted for sure. I mean, you're right. I mean, you can get that vibe right away. And I tend to be also the one who breaks the ice. I'm like, so, I mean, just because, again, why go to work if you're all going to be so like miserable and, it'd be so tense and I mean, but you're right. I mean, I think that is one of the biggest things is how can people in leadership positions invite people in and make that really powerful connection with people? Because we do have lots of opportunities to do that, even through Zoom. So I think that's really important.
And without that connection, it's almost impossible then to hook that communication in. Yeah. And then it's almost impossible from that communication to have influence. So people say, I want to be more influential, and they're working at a surface level of influence, saying, well, I'll try this tactic, I'll try that tactic, I'll try. It's like, let's come back to right down the underneath the surface and say, step number one is really connect in and then communicate their way. And then you've got an opportunity to influence, whether it's a team member, a senior leader, whether you're managing that whole 360 degrees, or whether it's to a customer. If you don't have that process and you're trying to come at it from the other end, you just look like the smuggler of influence, the shady manipulator. Yep. Whereas if you come from the other way, you're coming from, Robert Cialdini said, the sleuth of influence, where you're really tapping in and connecting to real people. Yeah. And isn't it a case of like right now where we are in the world, there is nothing more important. And I think this pandemic has taught us that the one thing we actually need is this connection of humans to humans. I think, you know, a lot of bad things have happened because of COVID-19, but the one good thing that I hope will come out of it is that we're actually a better human race, because we've actually probably thought about people on the planet as a whole for potentially the first time in our generations, and then how we actually, the importance of that connection.
Yeah, it's so important. And yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that was one of the biggest lessons, at least for me through the pandemic, was finding ways to still connect with people, even through video, even when you're not in person, and you can do it. And I think also what you were talking about, that slimy kind of influencing, like you were talking about, again, I've seen it so many times and I've always disdained it, because it's like in front of a group or, you know, in front of an all hands meeting, it's like you're really connected and engaging. But then when you walk past somebody in the hallway, you kind of don't act like they exist. Or if it's not in your best interest to look a certain way, you don't make the effort. I think you have to be consistent. And I think it has to be something that you build constantly every day. It's not just hooking people in when you need it. It's just being that authentic kind of part of yourself and trying to really invite people in as much as you can.
Exactly. But it, you know, I don't think that it's an innate skill of many people to be able to do this. I don't think many people are born that way. I think that if you look at the really successful people in the world, you know, across the world, and people that have made the most impact, they've learned this skill. They've learned it. They've honed it. They've put effort into it, because we just don't wake up as a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old or a 40-year-old and just have this skill. No. We don't. It's a learnt skill. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be difficult. It's about just stopping before you speak, or stopping before you press send on an email, or stopping before you go into your next Zoom call and going, okay, instead of doing, as you said, here's the project, blah, 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 go for it. Stop and do it differently and say, okay, let's just run this meeting a little bit differently and see if I get a better outcome. It's actually the tiny little things that, when you add them up, cumulatively will make the biggest difference. Yeah. And so it's using those words and phrases and structures to say, okay, for the next 30 days, I will have the Intergenius template on my desk and I will follow it. And then one day you've got papers over the top of it, but you can do it anyway. So you become conscious, and then you become unconsciously competent, and then you've got a skill, and then you're cool, then off you go. But it's a learned skill. It's
Are you reading my tweets, by the way? Because I just tweeted this morning. I mean, it's something that I say a lot, but growth happens in tiny tweaks, not giant leaps. So it's about, how do and I also heard you talking about experimenting, which I think is a really powerful tool. I use it a lot in coaching as well. It's about, how do we have a different relationship with ourselves? So, because I know for me, it's about, Jen, you're not good enough. You messed up today. And like almost having that really strong judgmental inner critic that when I'm trying to have good intentions and I mess up, I tend to really, and I know a lot of us have that kind of judgmental part of us. So it's also about, I think, being more friendly with it and experimenting and say, okay, for the next 20 days, I'm going to try this and see how it goes. And what did I learn? And then what I learned, I can maybe tweak and, use in my next experiment, and just keep doing those little tweaks. But the experimenting element for me really resonates, because it feels less pressure. It feels less like, Jen, you have to be a certain way or else, or you're a failure. We're just experimenting and just let's see how things go, and developing new habits that way. For me, I've just found to be really beneficial. So I like that you mentioned the experimenting and how important those tiny tweaks are.
Exactly. And if they work, keep doing them. And if they don't, stop. It's pretty simple. If you get a disastrous result, or you send an email and you've tried to do something and you don't get a response, well, then maybe it didn't work, or maybe the person just didn't get the email. Maybe there's a whole lot of things, but it's worth a try. Why not just try? Because it's actually like no lives are at risk here. You know, in some of my training that I'm working with, people's lives are at risk. You're working with patients in a pharmaceutical company or hospitals with hospital educators. Okay, lives are at risk there. But in the way you send an email or the way you construct a meeting or the way you do a project or a presentation, no one's going to die, right? So why not just try and say, I've been doing this my way for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, however old, and then however long you've been in business for. Okay, I'm just going to have the courage to do something a little bit different. I don't have to change my whole world. Yeah, just try one new thing. What could, and if it works, go, great, that worked. What else can I do? Yeah. Right, that worked. Wow, I had 2 team members who were at each other's throats. Now they're working well together. Great. Where's my next drama in my team? Oh, this person's underperforming. Okay, let me work on that person in a new way. Or let me work with that person in a new way. Let me be different to that person in a new way. Right, what's my next issue? My next issue is we have a lack of this or a lack of that, or we haven't met that project goal, or we're not doing this. Or whatever. Okay, let's do that a little bit differently. Bringing it down, as you said, to those tiny little steps, you know, and just tweaking, refining. It's a game. Yeah. When I send out an email, it's a game to see how much of that email my team picks up. If they come back with questions that are in the email, it means that I've communicated that bit my way. Yeah. And so I'm not hooking them in. So I want them to come back with questions that are beyond the scope of that email. Yeah. It's a game.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's a great way to wrap things up. I think it's a great way to just, I love that you said pausing and making those small tweaks and looking at it like, yeah, like it is a game. And I tell myself that often too in work. I'm like, nobody's going to die. The world is not going to come to an end. I mean, like you said, in some professions that is the case, but in mine, it's not. So it's like, let's not be so serious about this. And let's try just to make a real effort to kind of see what we can tweak and see what that produces. So I'd love to know, what are some of your offerings? And if people are interested in knowing more, where can they go to find you, find out more about this?
So step 1 is, if you want to do the profile, go to the website, which is innergeniusnow, NOW.com, innergeniusnow.com. You can do the profile straight away. So that will be the first thing. That will then open up that vault of reports and tools and all sorts of information, your Alexa skills and your Spotify playlist, all of that will be in that profile part. If you think, well, that's a good thing to do, I want to do more, then we have a 6-week program. We have corporate programs for teams, for large groups, for entire organizations. Get in touch with me either through the website or go to my LinkedIn to Catherine Mattiske, send me a message and say, hey, Catherine, I want to have a coffee with you. Book into my calendar and I'll show up and let's talk. And then if we can find common ground between what you need and what we've got, great. And if we can't, it just means that I've met a nice person and had a coffee. Lovely.
Perfect. I love it. That sounds great. And I appreciate you taking the time to, you know, go through this beautiful body of work that you've created and, you know, the help that you're giving and insight you're giving into so many people's lives. It's just, I loved our conversation today. If I could switch gears real quick, just for a quick second, I like to do this segment at the end called the leading questions that just gives us a little bit more information about who you are as a person and maybe beyond the archetypes and kind of business. So the first question is, what is your favorite book on your bookshelf?
Oh, it's an Australian book. I've just read it twice on my Audible, and I actually just bought the book because I needed to own the book, called Catch of the Decade. And it's about these 2 Australian brothers that started off with nothing and sold their business for multi-million dollars to a big Australian company. And it's their journey as brothers, and it's fabulous. I love it.
Really?
And I've read it 3 times, and I got to meet one of the brothers as well recently. And it's just like, you would walk past him in the grocery store, and he's a gazillionaire.
Yeah.
And he said at the end of our meeting, he said, I've got to go. He said, I've got to go and buy fruit and vegetables for my wife for dinner. And it's like so normal, so natural, so great. So Catch of the Decade, it's fab.
Catch of the Decade. I'll have to check that out. What is one thing you are most proud about?
Most proud about? Outside of work, because work is all I'm really proud of my work, because I've taken my business from just me to being a global organisation and working with really cool organisations. So that's all. I'm very proud of that. But most proud was actually happened last year. I play the piano, and I started the piano when I was 10. And I sold my piano a few years back, like about 10 years back. And last year I bought my dream piano, which was a Steinway grand piano. And it was and when they delivered it, I was in tears. I said, this is like all my Christmases had come at once, because I have now a Steinway piano. Yeah. And I'm so proud of the fact that, well, first I'm really rusty I can't play like I used to, but I'll get there again, because anything on a Steinway sounds better. But I'm so proud of the fact that all my work has enabled me to go and buy a Steinway piano, which is the dream of like concert pianists, to own a Steinway, and I own one. So I'm pretty proud.
That's really cool. Wow, that's awesome. I'm jealous. I never had the kind of musical ear, the musical touch. Could never, I don't know why, it just never really clicked for me. So I'm always jealous of people who can play an instrument. Tell me about an influential person in your life, and how did they impact you?
Oh, influential person. I think it was actually my very first customer. When I started doing my computer training, a woman by the name of Michaeli Molseed came up to me in a break, and she said to me, I was training Microsoft Word, advanced Word, like boring, merging and forms and all that, right? And I was really into it, and I still am. I'm a nerd. And she came up to me and she said, in a break, and she said, Catherine, you're not a real trainer. Well, my world stopped, and I thought, oh my goodness, I've been found out. She can see my yellow marker writing on my flip charts, because that's where I used to cheat to have the answers of things. No one else could see it but me. I had a whole structure around me so that I looked like a really, tech savvy person, but I was really just learning as fast as I could. And she had the most influence on me, because at that point, instead of going, I said, what do you mean? And she said, because you know how to train adults. And she said, I want you to come and train my trainers. And it turned out she was the head of learning and development for a big organisation in Australia. Well, it was that organisation that sent me to their US office. And that's how I got into the US. And then I started speaking at conferences in the US, and my US business grew, and then Europe started up. And so the influence that woman had on me in that moment was absolutely vast. And so she's probably been one of the most influential people in my life, because I can track almost my entire business back to that woman.
Wow. As you were telling your story, I have a very similar story of it, and it always reflect on it. I always reflect on it and think back to just one question can shift something in your life and send you on a whole, like you said, new trajectory. And you can trace it back to that one question, which is why I feel like curiosity and being present is so important, because being able to ask that question, it may have been just she didn't really put a lot of thought into it. She just had a moment of, hey, I think but how quickly we can change someone's life in just such a small, that's why the tiny tweaks, that's why I'm such a believer in just those small little things. That's all it takes. It doesn't need to be, that's really powerful.
So she changed the trajectory of my entire life quite unknowingly. And I actually lost track of her. And a few months ago, I thought, I'm going to find you And I've actually found where she is, but I haven't reached out to her because I actually can't.
Mm.
So when this pandemic is over, I know where she is. She's running a health food store about in another state now. She's left corporate. I'm going to go in there and go, you don't remember me, but you've been one of the biggest influences of my life.
Wow.
So,
that would be a powerful thing. I'm also a believer in that. And we should tell each other more when those things happen. I think that means a lot to people to be able to say, you changed my life, and just say thank you. And wow, that's a beautiful story. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Right now, I feel like I'm in the right place because we're in this beautiful bubble. I live on Mount Macedon, which is just out of Melbourne.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never spent so much time at home until the pandemic, because I was traveling 10 and a half months a year. And so I was never at home with my family. That was my life. And then the pandemic hit, and now it's like, hello, who are you people? And so, but we live on a beautiful property, 7 acres on top of a mountain of 7 acres of beautiful botanical gardens. It's just gorgeous. So I think actually right here, right now would be absolutely fine for me. But I did a stint in Vienna, and I fell in love with Vienna. And even to the point that I was like going, okay, I'll open an office here. That'll give me more of an excuse to come back. So that was in the old world before the pandemic, which I call the old world. But yeah, Vienna's a pretty special place for me. I just felt that connection to it, and it was just easy and beautiful. And my goodness, those Vienna pastry shops and, you know, beautiful walkways, and what's down that laneway. Oh, divine.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned a couple times that connection, and I was thinking back to when you were talking earlier about, you know, how important that is to have those connections and those hooks, because I feel like that's what humanity is all about, are those connections, right? To things, to places, to people, I mean, how beautiful that you get to do that in your work. That's really amazing. So the last question is, what is the most important lesson that you have learned in your life that you could share?
Wow. There's probably, can I have two?
Sure. Why not?
I'm a bit of an overachiever. The first one is say yes and work out the detail later. So when a client says to me, hey, Catherine, can you do this? I go, yeah, I can do that. And then I'm like a duck on a pond, and I'm going, how on earth are we going to pull this one off, right? So I just say yes and show up. And I spent a long time in New York City. And one of my friends in New York said, Catherine, every time someone says, do you want to go somewhere, even if it's to some bizarre monarch butterfly appreciation group, say yes. Right? No matter what it is, whether you want to go or not, say yes. And so I say yes to everything as well, you know, within reason, if it's legal. And so I show up and I say yes. So that's my first life lesson. My next life lesson is, what is the best use of my time right now? So if I'm waiting to join a call and I've got 6 minutes, what can I do in those 6 minutes instead of just sitting there? Can I do something? What's the best use of my time right now? And sometimes that is binging a Netflix series because I need time out. That is the best use of my time, to binge on Netflix. Or the best use of my time might be to cook for my family. Or the best use of my time might be 2 minutes before I've got to do a presentation. What's the best use of my time right now? So that is, I feel like if I got a tattoo, and I'm not really a tattoo person, I think I'd have that tattooed on on me somewhere. What would be the use? I don't know, but what's the best use of my time right now? Yeah.
Just as a reminder, it sounds like a way of, you know, your way of like self-managing and regulating, governing, and optimizing kind of your time. And I also heard curiosity in there too. That's a big practice for me, is, you know, what do I need right now? What can get done if I need to in this moment? But again, going also back to like being really present and being in the moment. And that
Mm.
goes back again to the tiny tweaks, because we get sometimes, I know as a futurist, you're probably a lot of times looking kind of way out into the beyond, right?
It's exhausting.
But
It's
how do we,
exhausting.
anchor ourselves back in the present moment? Because that's where a lot of the, again, those steps and those tweaks are going to happen. That's amazing insight. Thank you so much for your time, Catherine. It was such a pleasure learning more about you and learning about your wonderful program, Unlock Your Inner Genius. And I highly recommend anyone listening to the show, go and take the test, discover what archetype you are. And let me know if you do take the test. I would love to hear more about that. But thank you so much for your time today, Catherine. It was a real pleasure.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.